So Marc, let's turn to a different subject that you've been involved in. That's what's going on in the university and college campuses right now. You've been involved particularly at Pennsylvania and the Wharton School for a good long time on the board. Have things changed on college campuses, or has it always been thus and it's just been triggered by this Israel-Gaza phenomenon?
Look, I think we've actually seen a lot of change take place over time. So I have a very favorable memory of my experience at the University of Pennsylvania campus. But think more broadly. U.S. universities were and are the envy of the world. We can destroy that. We can lose it. Why are kids there? Why did we think they were there? Be exposed to different points of view, learn how to think, critical reasoning, critical thinking, maturation. Is that what they're getting today? I think in some places it is what they're getting, and in some classes it is what they're getting. But what I saw at the University of Pennsylvania and what I spoke out against was a dominant narrative that was taking hold on our campuses. Call it a post-colonial education, call it what you will. It gave rise to an institutionalization of a point of view that there were favored groups and disfavored groups, that there was acceptable speech and non-acceptable speech. I'm not sure that's the job that we all signed up for, or that's the university that we signed up for. What we're watching today on these campuses is nothing more than the outgrowth of 20 years of bad management. If you have a dominant narrative on campus, do you have academic freedom? Do you have freedom of speech? I have seen over the past few years, as I've really stepped up my involvement, professors, department chairs, who are afraid to speak their mind because their thoughts, their speech, goes against the dominant narrative. What we're watching today on campuses, we're told, are leftists. We used to think leftists were liberal. This hardly seems liberal. This actually seems illiberal in the most extreme way. Why haven't they been cleared out? Well, listen to Ben Sasse at the University of Florida. We're all about free speech. We're all about the right to protest. But there's a time and a place and a way. You violate and trespass, there are consequences. Why would we not deal with them everywhere in that way? Certainly, protests that were inconsistent with the narrative that we find on our campuses have and will be dealt with in that manner. Speakers are regularly shouted down. Professors, university administrators who did not react in that way without that kind of moral clarity, they now have encampments. Once you have encampments, you have the potential for violence. You have other considerations that come into play. But make no mistake, outside agitators, not mostly students, trespass, danger to the rest of the students and the rest of the community. This is what 20 years of a dominant narrative has done.
These are not corporations, but if they were corporations, what you just described to me, I would say there's a failure of management in some. I'm not saying necessarily all, but in some, a fundamental failure of management. Having seen it from the inside, where is the failure?
The failure is in multiple places, but I think it starts with me and with us as trustees. We were asleep at the wheel for 20 years. Part of our job was to provide balance. I do not think the popular frame of a campus today where trustees and alumni are fighting professors over academic freedom is actually correct. I actually think the appropriate frame is university administrators who maintain this dominant narrative are fighting professors for academic freedom. Trustees and alumni are here to provide balance. We have been asleep at the wheel. We have not done what we were supposed to do. We did not object as these dominant narratives took hold, and it is our job, I believe, to support long-term excellence in education, academic research, freedom of expression, freedom to disagree. That's not what we have on many of our campuses today. We've gotten a long way from academic excellence.
How is that corrected without the trustees overstepping their boundaries? I mean, you know and I know, when you sit on a board, there are certain things you really need to do. You don't want to run the thing day to day. You don't have trustees there to be micromanagers. How do you have the proper role for the trustees without overstepping boundaries?
There's a question of overstepping. I think the danger right now is far from trustees overstepping the bounds. I think trustees, for the most part at these big institutions, myself included, have failed to act. We have not done our job in the most fundamental way. I don't think we are anywhere close to the line of overstepping our bounds. Most universities operate in a shared governance manner. Transparency is often the best disinfectant. I do not believe at the University of Pennsylvania or many of these campuses, the vast majority of professors actually believe in this dominant narrative. We as trustees can assure anonymous polling, representation across the faculty, lots of other things that we can do, in addition to just exercising common sense. But ultimately, the job of a trustee is to pick a leader and to provide that leader with some notion of strategic plan. Picking good leaders goes a long way. Developing a strategic plan goes a long way. And as you said, it is not the job of the trustee or the alumni, for that matter, to run these universities. This is best left to professional administrators.
This all comes against the backdrop of increasing questioning of the price of a college education and whether it's worth it, whether you get the return on investment you deserve. As the value, at least in some of these institutions, actually gone down of the investment. And will there be a market correction as people start to say, you know what, it's not worth it to send my kid, I'll pick on a college right now, Columbia, when they can't graduate at commencement?
Right. Very unfortunate situation. I don't want to say value has gone down. I think value's been dispersed. So if I look at our industry as a microcosm, 30 years ago, we hired from a very narrow subset of universities. You know what? There are 50 great places. There are not 8 or 10 great places. There are 50 great places. So we're watching the value of an education democratize. We are, as an employer, and I know our peer group as employers, increasingly going to places that we had never gone to before. Why? Because the end product is excellent. And it is not, we do not take for granted that because someone went to one of 10 schools, they actually received an excellent education. We do not treat people as groups. We actually treat them as individuals. Imagine the novelty of that. We don't label them by their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, their ethnicity. We actually look at them as individuals. What have they done? What have they achieved? If I sum up what we do, and I think what our industry does, we hire based on merit, adjusted for distance traveled.
Does it make it harder for you to hire people? Because as you describe what you described, it sounds a little bit like alpha versus beta in investing. You know, we had to be able to go to beta with that handful of schools, said they came to that school, will take it. Now you have to figure out who's really done well at the schools, who's gotten a good education, who hasn't.
No, I think this is opening up an employment marketplace for us. We are, in our industry, really fortunate. We hire great individuals coming out of school, but we also have the luxury of hiring people who have years of experience in another part of our industry. We get to see essentially a little bit of their track record. But I think this democratization of hiring is actually just good for our industry.
As you said, Marc, I think Brandeis said that sunlight is the best disinfectant. There seems to be a lot of sunlight right now on college campuses. Could this actually redound to the benefit of our higher education system, actually, as we really are exposed to this, we debate it publicly, and we make some reforms?
Look, for me, I'm an optimist, but I am incredibly hopeful that this is a moment. As much as our college presidents and leaders are suffering under congressional inquiry right now, it's only because what they've done historically can't be defended. Imagine if they actually got up there and they had something to say, this is how we run it, this is our goal, this is our plan, this is how we make sure the kids are protected and also challenged. Being called in front of Congress is only a negative if in fact you have something to hide. I think in academia, we've done a very poor job in the past 20 years. We've got a lot of mistakes to rectify, but I do hope this is a sunlight disinfecting moment of going forward.
One of the things we've seen actually is donors now saying we're going to withhold donations. You've been involved in that as well, but it goes well beyond Penn, well beyond you. Do you think that's having any effect? Can you see any tangible effect in any of these colleges?
Yes. I'll leave it there over time. Look, people generally do not support those things that are against their fundamental interest. They may do it for a small period of time where they actually don't know. I think what we've seen in the past year, donors are now on notice as to what their university or college is or is not doing, and they will elect to fund or not fund places in which they believe are consistent with their values, consistent with their principles. For me, I'm hopeful that these big institutions are going to change. I know there are a number of entrepreneurs who have simply looked and said, these places are never changing. Let's start the institutions of the future. And they've attracted some really good, really important faculty. But let's not also forget, technology is changing these institutions. Technology is democratizing access to knowledge. You know, to think that any industry, even academia, is immune to the forces of change, I think is just naive. I think this is a good opportunity for our universities to have a come to Jesus moment and really think about what the future is for them and who they want to be.